Ferrari is missing in this start of the 2025 Formula One Championship. The Italian team just can't seem to take off, with performance that remains crippled. The new floor seemed like it could offer something extra at the 6.174-kilometer Jeddah Corniche Circuit. And yet, when all was said and done, the qualifying result remained the same. Charles Leclerc, skillful in getting the most out of the SF25 car, secured the second row with a fourth-place finish behind George Russell. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton did not go beyond seventh place, even behind the man who took his seat, namely Carlos Sainz, now driving for Williams. Once again, the setup choice doesn't pay off simply because the performance isn't there. Without getting lost in too much detail, we immediately notice that a large gap formed in the first three corners, an issue already seen on Friday during the first free practice sessions and not resolved by the Maranello team's technicians and engineers. Looking at the lap as a whole, the first turns are the only slow ones on the circuit. The SF25 has mechanical grip, and we have seen that it can benefit in terms of racing line, so the issue is not low-speed grip per se. We need to look at the situation more broadly and consider two key factors that likely had a major impact. The first is that Ferrari aimed to optimize one type of corner, but in doing so, made handling more difficult in other sections. A Formula One car must always be a compromise, and in this case, fast corners matter more as they make up most of the track. In terms of suspension setup, the Maranello-based Formula One team had fewer options compared to Red Bull and McLaren, who both start with a much stiffer suspension base. Ferrari had to search for this characteristic in their setup in order to get the most out of the platform. Once again, this is not a problem stemming from the rear suspension, which is the result of various design choices that are useful on other circuits. Ferrari's operating window is quite narrow and, in general, it has less raw performance than the Red Bull RB21 single-seater, which has a lot of pace but is even harder to fine-tune. The second key factor concerns the tires, as the front ones cool down very quickly. Both Italian cars started their laps with front tire temperatures too far from the target value. This issue affected other teams as well. However, others managed to mitigate it or at least balance the gap over the course of the lap. Ferrari's outcome in the qualifying session for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is therefore the result of these two factors, in roughly equal measure. Apart from that, the balance wasn't bad, but they continued to suffer from slight understeer compared to their main competitors. This aspect significantly reduces how much speed they can carry through the middle of the corner. On top of that, the car is not very stable during direction changes. Looking at battle for pole position, McLaren was more competitive than Red Bull. Consider that Max Verstappen got a strong slipstream on the main straight, arriving at turn 1 with a 0.1 second advantage over Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri. The Dutchman gained a full 8 km per hour on the main straight compared to his closest rivals. The Austrian team knew they didn't have more pace than the MCL39, but they are aware that in the race it will be hard to overtake them due to their high top speeds. Without a doubt, in Jeddah, McLaren once again had the most complete package. Overall, Oscar Piastri was a bit weaker on corner entry, but very quick in the second half of the turns, from the acceleration phase onward. In the first meters of the exit, he was gaining time on the ultra-fast RB21, but by the end of each straight, the blue liveried car was back on top. The only positive note for the Maranello team is once again Charles Leclerc, who used all his talent to finish fourth in qualifying. With his Ferrari, he was quite confident going into the fifth weekend of the 2025 Formula One season. He had approached Jeddah with great determination and a desire to perform well. The Monegasque driver was convinced the new floor could provide an extra boost in Saudi Arabia, aware that data analysis and understanding of the new major component could offer a benefit that had remained untapped in Bahrain. It was supposed to be Lewis Hamilton's team, and yet, judging by what we've seen in recent weeks, Ferrari still seems to be Charles Leclerc's team. After a season start complicated by media pressure surrounding the arrival of his new teammate, the Monegasque driver is slowly finding a balance that allows him to consistently stay just behind the podium spots, a podium that continues to elude him, and which, according to driver number 16, still seems like the highest achievable goal for the race in Jeddah. The SF25, after a Friday that had brought a smile to Charles Leclerc's face, ended up about 3/10 behind the pole position claimed by Max Verstappen, a gap that, according to team principal Fred Vasseur, lies entirely in the first two corners. From the very first practice sessions, the Maranello team did not seem comfortable, particularly in the initial section of the Saudi circuit. This was confirmed in qualifying, where Lewis Hamilton almost failed to make it into Q3. During free practice, the Monegasque continued working on his driving technique. His handling was undoubtedly prolific, as he managed to cover some of the SF25's shortcomings while optimizing its strengths. It should be noted that, for the final free practice session at the Jeddah circuit, the Italian team made a tactical decision, replacing both power units in the cars bearing the prancing horse on their chassis. Specifically, the second internal combustion engine, the turbocharger, both MGUK and MGUH units, and the exhaust system. This was a decision aimed at fully exploiting the power of the 06-615 power unit on a track where engine performance can make a big difference. This was not a matter of end-of-life cycle, as these components can still be used later, for example in free practice sessions. Back on track, Ferrari once again showed clear difficulty in tire activation. This is why, in FP3 in Saudi Arabia, the maximum grip available from the Pirelli tires remained unused, hence the large gap to McLaren. Fortunately, temperatures were lower during qualifying, which helped Ferrari reach the correct operating window. Charles Leclerc secured fourth place, giving his all to optimize the performance of his car. A complicated qualifying as tire activation was difficult, and it seems the target temperature on the tires was far from ideal. The gap to the front remains unchanged, those cursed 3 to 4 tenths that have persisted since the start of the 2025 Formula One Championship. Nothing changes, in short. As mentioned, the tires didn't help in two key areas: lower cornering speeds and a certain tendency toward understeer, which prevents optimal curb aggression in some direction changes. Charles Leclerc did not hide his disappointment with a qualifying session he had hoped would deliver more. Jeddah was a track where he had placed a lot of hope, which made the disappointment all the more bitter. The reality, however, is that Ferrari still lacks the potential to truly fight with the best. Despite everything, Charles Leclerc said he was personally satisfied. He has found a clear direction in his driving approach, something that allows him to extract the maximum from the SF25 over a single lap. Unfortunately, it is not enough to fight at the top with McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes, and this leaves him disappointed and not very hopeful for today's race. The Monegasque really likes the driving style he has chosen. It makes him feel competitive, but at the same time makes the car more unstable and harder to control. This was clearly seen in the final stages of the qualifying session, where, not by chance on his final lap in the SF25 car, he came close to hitting the wall 2 or 3 times. A qualifying session pushed to the limit, where the Ferrari driver once again took all the necessary risks and brought home everything that was possible considering the potential of the car.